Late on Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced what he is calling a breakthrough deal scheduled to take effect this coming Friday. Now, so far, this deal is short on details, but here is what we know tonight. The United States and Iran have announced an immediate and a permanent end to hostilities. Now, the text of the agreement, perhaps with those crucial details, will be signed and released on Friday. Now, that is when the Strait of Hormuz will be open to commercial traffic again. And the United States says that it will lift its blockade of Iranian ports. Now, both sides say that there will be a 60-day period in which further talks may take place. U.S. officials are saying that those talks will include Iran's nuclear program. Now, Donald Trump will have plenty of opportunity to explain the terms of the deal to U.S. allies face-to-face this week at the summit of G7 nations in France. And there is plenty to clear up. In addition to Iran's nuclear ambitions, there is Tehran's demand that economic sanctions be lifted. And what about Israel? It started the war against Iran with the United States. It was apparently not a party to the talks winding that war down. And joining me now is Behnam Taleblu, the Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. He has written extensively on Iran's military and nuclear program. Ben, it's good to have you back on the program. The war appears to be ending, heading to where things were in February before the war began. And with that in mind, has the United States achieved any of its objectives?
Great to be with you. It's an excellent question because the objectives of the war vary greatly here in Washington, D.C., depending on who you ask and their political orientation. No doubt, as the Trump administration is looking to restore the status ante quo bellum, the pre-war status order for this very important international waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, which governs access between the Gulf of Oman and international waters and the Persian Gulf, and also where about 20% of the world's seaborne oil trade is traded through on a daily basis, and that was disrupted by this conflict. Certainly restoring that is a win, but obviously that waterway was open prior to the conflict anyway. To be able to call the Trump administration's use of force against the Islamic Republic a win, you have to look at the military ledger, and there the taking out of the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, who, by the way, hasn't received a funeral yet, but is slated to do so in the next coming weeks, as well as really the gutting of its defense industrial base through joint Israeli-American strikes, are probably enough for the Trump administration to call it a victory on points.
The United States and Iran, they continue to offer conflicting claims about the terms of this deal. Of course, we're not going to even talk about what they say happened in the past. And yet Iran says that it could possibly access its frozen assets and get sanctions relief before negotiations get underway. I mean, we certainly can't test the veracity of that statement at this point, but it does seem that Tehran has already secured much or most of what it wanted. Do you see it that way as well?
Well, there's a difference, I would say, between what the regime is saying that it was given during this deal and what is increasingly emerges as a series of problematic, probably bilateral arrangements between some countries in the Persian Gulf and the Islamic Republic to be able to get their tankers out through the Strait of Hormuz, particularly later in the day. There's questions of a pay-to-play scheme for Qatari tankers. There's questions of a UAE potential cash delivery to the Islamic Republic. The more you begin to talk about money, the more you begin to see the wheels of a deal in motion here. Now, the challenge here is obviously for the U.S., how do you keep your broad sanctions architecture while still negotiating with the Islamic Republic in a bid to try to get that architecture lifted, whether that's for the Strait of Hormuz or for compliance on a whole host of other nuclear demands. The challenge broadly again for the Islamic Republic now is accessing those funds which remain in restricted accounts. The Trump administration is adamant that Iran will not be getting cash, but as we know, any kind of aid, financial agreement, access to monies, particularly in non-real denominated accounts, that helps make funding for other things, be it terrorism, the missile program, the nuclear program, a bit more elastic and fungible. What I would say is to keep your eye on is what is U.S. sanctions following the second deal, meaning the thing that America and Iran are going to try to get after 60 days. Because if that is going to see the lifting of major American sanctions in response to some sort of Iranian commitment to downblend or ship out their enriched uranium, well, then we're going to have some real questions as to what kind of maximum pressure policy did the Trump administration even run against Iran.
Ben, we've got 60 days, and we know that the JCPOA, the original Iranian nuclear deal, it took years for an agreement to be reached. We're talking about, technical issues here, knowledge about nuclear science. Is it even possible to contemplate, after 60 days, having anything close to a deal that will satisfy the demands of Washington as well as Tehran?
60 days is certainly not 2.5 years, which was the period of time to move from the JPOA, the 2013 interim deal, to the JCPOA, the final quote-unquote nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. But I would also say this, the Iranian nuclear program and Iran's nuclear infrastructure is very, very different. Hopefully the Trump administration is negotiating with Iran on how to build on America's use of force against Iran's nuclear program rather than undo the military and political effects of the use of force against that program. Here's one very important metric to keep in mind, by the way. In June 2025, the U.S. struck Iran's declared uranium enrichment facilities and at least one storage site. If Iran is allowed to restore access to those sites or be able to re-enrich at a point later in time down the line, then that would undermine the use of force both in June and again starting in February of this year. So the art of the deal for the Trump administration is not how do you negotiate and get an equally complex or even better and more complex deal, is how do you, short circuit that process and build on the military results you've gotten. And this will, again, require playing to the edge, being willing to entertain, unfortunately, this game of chicken. And I could easily see a world in which the Iranians choose not to budge on things that they may have agreed to in the past, forcing America at an inflection point to have to restart a conflict or extend a 60-day ceasefire by potentially another 60 days.
Are you confident that the United States has the people and the know-how to go in and to make these negotiations happen even at this accelerated rate? Because obviously there are tons of reports about specialists, particularly in nuclear science, who were let go or who left their positions, particularly when DOGE was in effect. Does the United States have the people it needs to make this happen?
Well, certainly if you're dealing with an enrichment site that was already shuttered, you don't need someone who is a specialist in enrichment unless you're looking to rescale up Iran's nuclear activities there. You're looking to build on that. If you're looking to grant Iran enrichment and then regulate that enrichment, yes, absolutely. But you need technical expertise, but you need technical expertise that is also trusted and also has the ear of the administration. One reason I think that the Islamic Republic was willing to bite this go around, just like it did during the JCPOA period, is that it felt that whoever the interlocutor was actually had the ear of the administration and was politically empowered, perhaps more important than being technically empowered to make that deal. So do I think the administration has great folks? Yes, I think they do. But do I think these are exceptionally complex issues? Yes, I think they do. Yes, I think they are as well. The question is, what does the administration want for this broader second phase 2 deal? Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was the first person to say that if they transposed everything that they had talked about with the Americans from the phase 1 deal onto a piece of paper, it would really only be 2 pages. How many pages the Trump administration envisions for that potential larger phase 2 deal, that remains to be seen because, well, their aims remain to be seen.
I want to ask you, before we run out of time, about the Israel-Lebanon factor in this. I mean, we're getting conflicting reports or claims about what this deal means for the fighting in Lebanon. Do you see Israel being the wild card here? Is Israel the party that could actually torpedo this entire deal?
Oh, well, the short-term thing that I could actually torpedo this deal up until we get the deal out in the public, which is where I believe it needs to be. The American public, the European public, the Iranian public, the Gulf Arab public, everyone who suffered from this crisis or stands to benefit from, a peace dividend is deserved to see, what is actually in this and was the juice worth the squeeze, politically and militarily. Moving away from the table, so long as you don't get that, the wild card is actually the narrative war, that Iran is taking a victory lap, America is taking a victory lap, and neither of the two shall actually meet. And that can actually build on the mistrust that exists already and push the two sides further apart. So as much as I have qualms and questions about how Iran was able to link a deal over the Strait of Hormuz to potentially something involving Lebanon, and was the administration, mistaken in restraining an ally very publicly rather than doubling down against an adversary, the short-term wild card is the narrative war and the impact on the next 60 days of negotiations.
And final question for you. For viewers who may not have followed this story closely, it could appear that, regardless of what the details are for this deal, that Iran has come out of this stronger, the United States not so strong. Do you agree with that assessment?
Materially, the regime has come out weaker. Politically, I think, unfortunately, if we take a snapshot, they've come out stronger. There is a world of difference between those two, between material and immaterial terms, but this is a regime that has less capacity, but most unfortunately is willing to use that capacity more often, which means that it's weaker, but still lethal and therefore dangerous. So we are not at all out of the woodwork yet.
Behnam Taleblu at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. Ben, good to have you on the show. As always, we appreciate your valuable insights into this. Thank you.